You have done it. After weeks in the mud, after burying men at the foot of the wall, your engineers have finally opened a breach. The stone gives way, the dust rolls out, and your soldiers pour through the gap into the castle. And in that moment, standing inside the enemy's fortress at last, you are in the most dangerous place on the entire battlefield. Because the wall you just broke was never the last one. It was the bait. Above you, a second wall rises higher than the one you just destroyed, packed with men who have been waiting all morning for exactly this. You are standing in a corridor of open ground with stone on both sides, no cover, no way forward, and a long way back. This is not a design flaw. This is the design. A great castle was not built to stop you at the wall. It was built to let you through the first one and kill you behind it. So let us walk it. We are going to approach a fully developed medieval castle the way an attacking army would, layer by layer, from the outside in, and at every single layer we are going to ask the same two questions. How does this thing try to kill me on the way in? And how does it try to kill me again once I think I am through? But first understand what you are actually looking at. A castle is not a big house with a wall around it. It is a machine for multiplying men. A garrison is always outnumbered, sometimes 10 or 20 to 1, and every feature we are about to walk past exists to make one defender worth 10 attackers. The idea reaches its peak in the 12th and 13th centuries with a design called the concentric castle. Not one ring of defense, but two complete rings, one inside the other. The Crusader fortress of Krak de Chevaliers in Syria, expanded between 1142 and 1170, is the great example, and the design traveled back to Europe with the men who had seen it work. Caerphilly in Wales became the first concentric castle in Britain, and when Edward I set out to hold down Wales between 1277 and 1283, he and his master builder James of St. George raised a whole network of them. Caernarfon, Conwy, Harlech, Beaumaris. That is the machine we are attacking. Let us start at the very outside. The first thing standing between you and the castle is not the castle. It is the barbican. Think of it as a fortified funnel bolted onto the front of the gate. Two walls running outward, sometimes a small tower of its own, with the road passing between them. It looks like a way in. It is a holding pen. To reach the gate, you have to walk your men down that corridor, and once they are inside it, the archers on both walls are shooting at their flanks, at close range, into a crowd that cannot spread out. Notice what has already happened here. The barbican does not stop you. It is not trying to. It is trying to make you spend soldiers to enter a space that has no cover and one exit, and that exit is a door built to hold. First kill on the way in, second kill once you are in. Beyond it lies the ditch, and if the ground allows, the moat. Everyone knows the moat as an obstacle, and it is one. It stops you rolling a siege tower or a battering ram up to the wall, which means your men have to fill a section of it with earth, timber, and rubble first, by hand, in the open, while the wall shoots down at them. But the moat's more important job is invisible. It kills mining. The single most reliable way to bring down a medieval wall was not to smash it, but to dig beneath it. Prop the tunnel with timber, and set the props on fire so that the tunnel collapses and takes the wall with it. Try that under a water-filled ditch and your tunnel floods before it ever reaches the foundation. The moat kills your men above ground and kills your best idea below it. And the defenders were not passive about that tunnel either. A garrison that suspected mining dug its own shaft to meet it. A countermine, listening for the sound of picks through the rock and breaking into the attacker's tunnel to fight underground in the dark, or simply to let the air and the water in and collapse the work. Somewhere under most great sieges there is a second, invisible siege happening, fought by men who never saw daylight for weeks. Cross the ditch and you reach the gate, which is where the design stops being defensive and becomes actively predatory. First, the drawbridge is up, so the entrance is simply gone. Suppose you bring it down. Now you are in the gate passage, and this is the most engineered space in the whole castle. It is deliberately narrow, so only a few of your men fit at a time. Ahead of you is a portcullis, a grid of oak shod in iron running in vertical grooves, which drops under its own weight and can be released in a heartbeat. Behind that, a second heavy timber gate barred from the inside by a beam sliding into deep sockets cut into the stone. And in the better gatehouses there is a second portcullis behind the first. Read that carefully because it is the whole thesis of this video in one detail. 2 portcullises means the defenders can let a group of you in, drop the grid behind you, and now your men are sealed in a stone box with your own army locked outside. Above their heads are the murder holes, openings in the ceiling of that passage through which the garrison drops stones, shoots down, and pours whatever is hot and available. In the side walls are arrow slits opening into small chambers, so men are shooting into the passage from the flanks as well. Every wall of that room is a weapon. The gate does not kill you because you cannot get through it. The gate kills you because you can. There is one more trick built into the better gatehouses, and it is aimed squarely at the battering ram. A ram works on momentum. A heavy log, swung or run forward, needs a straight approach and room behind it. So the builders took the straight line away. The passage bends. You come through the outer gate and the way turns sharp, often to the right, which means the ram cannot be driven at the inner door at all, and the men carrying it have to expose their unshielded side while they wrestle it around the corner. In some castles, the entrance climbs as it bends, so you are pushing several tons of timber uphill around a turn under murder holes. The bent entrance costs the builder almost nothing. It costs the attacker the single most effective door-breaking tool he owns. Since we are here, let us settle the most famous thing everyone believes about that moment: boiling oil. It is in every film, and the evidence for it is thin. Oil was expensive. Its boiling point is over 200 degrees Celsius. Heating and carrying it along a narrow wall walk is dangerous work, and a pot of burning oil in a stone castle full of timber floors is a threat to the people holding it. English heritage puts it plainly. Hot oil was rarely used. What the sources actually describe far more often is boiling water, heated sand, quicklime, and molten lead, and there are only scattered mentions of oil across centuries of siege, such as at Orleans in 1428. So the honest answer is not that it never happened. It is that it was rare, expensive, and awkward, and that the cheap horrors were the common ones. Heated sand finds the gaps in armor. Boiling water is limitless if you have a well. That is the real cruelty of the gate passage. It was not exotic, it was practical. Now look up at the wall itself, and at the stone lip that sticks out over your head near the top. That is machicolation, and it is one of the coldest ideas in medieval building. The parapet is carried outward on stone brackets, and between those brackets the floor is left open. It means the men above can attack the ground directly at the base of the wall, straight down, without leaning out into the open to do it. Hugging the wall used to be the safest place for an attacker. Machicolation is the answer to that. It turns the base of the wall, the one spot you have to reach in order to mine it or breach it, into the single most exposed patch of ground in the siege. Before stone machicolation existed, the same job was done in timber. Defenders bolted temporary wooden galleries onto the top of the wall called hoardings, projecting out over the drop with the floor left open in the same way. You can still see the square holes cut into old walls where the support beams went. Hoardings were quick and cheap, and they had one fatal flaw. They were made of wood, hanging over a battlefield where the other side was throwing fire. Crews covered the roofs in wet hides and hoped. Machicolation is what happens when a builder gets tired of hoping and decides to do it in stone. Now look at the narrow vertical slits cut into the wall and the towers, and understand that you are looking at the most lopsided trade in the castle. From the outside, an arrow loop is a gap a few inches wide. From the inside, it is completely different. The wall is hollowed out behind it into a wide splayed chamber called an embrasure, so the archer standing in that recess can swing his aim across a broad arc of ground, while the opening itself stays tiny. Some are cut with a horizontal bar to make a cross, giving the crossbowman a sideways sweep as well as up and down, and many flare at the bottom into a widened foot, so that a bolt can be angled steeply downward at men close to the wall. So the exchange is this. He can cover 60 degrees of your battlefield. You have to hit a slot the width of a hand from below while moving, while being shot at. Some attackers did make that shot. Almost none of them made it twice. And look at the bottom of the wall, where it flares outward into a thick, sloped skirt. That is the talus, sometimes called the batter, and it earns its keep 3 times over. It thickens the foundation exactly where miners and rams want to work. It forces a scaling ladder to lean at a worse angle, which makes climbing slower and the ladder easier to push away. And there is a third effect, the one that tells you how these builders thought. A stone dropped from the parapet does not simply land at the foot of the wall. It strikes the slope and bounces outward into the men standing there. The defenders were not just dropping rocks, they were aiming them by architecture, so let us say you have paid for all of it. The barbican, the ditch, the gate, the murder holes, the wall base. Your men have taken the outer wall and they are standing on top of it, and this feels like victory. It is the trap, because in a concentric castle, the outer wall is deliberately built lower than the inner one. That is not economy, that is targeting. The inner wall at Krak des Chevaliers stands roughly 9 meters higher than the outer ring. At Beaumaris, the outer curtain runs to something like 15 feet thick and 40 feet high, while the inner wall rises to roughly 60. The moment you stand on the outer wall or in the open ground behind it, you are below the archers on the inner wall, in full view, at close range, with nothing to hide behind. Better than that, from the defender's point of view, because the inner wall is higher, its archers can shoot clean over the heads of their own men, still fighting on the outer wall. The 2 rings do not take turns, they fire at the same time into the same space. That strip of ground between the walls has a name, the lists, and it is the answer to the title of this video. Break the first wall and you have not entered the castle. You have entered the killing ground, and every stone around you was placed to keep you there. The towers are the next thing to understand because they are not decoration, and they are not lookouts. A straight wall has a blind spot. An enemy standing flat against it cannot be hit from directly above unless you lean out. Push towers out from the wall line at intervals, and that problem disappears. From a projecting tower, you shoot along the face of the wall, sideways at the men pressed against it. That is flanking fire, and it is the reason towers exist. Their shape is a real engineering argument. Square towers are faster and cheaper to build and give more usable room inside, but a corner is a weakness. It concentrates the stone into a point that a ram can work and a miner can undercut, and one collapse corner takes the whole tower. Round towers have no corners, deflect projectiles that strike at an angle, and sit much better on an undermined foundation, but they cost more, take longer, and waste interior space. So, builders compromised with the D shape. The curved face outward where the enemy is, the flat wall inward where the floors and stairs need square corners. Every tower on a serious castle is a decision about what the builder feared most. Which brings us to the other thing everyone knows about castles, and the other thing that is not true. The spiral staircase. You have heard that they turn clockwise, so a right-handed defender coming down has his sword arm free, while the attacker climbing up has his blocked by the central column. It is a wonderful story. The problem is that no medieval source says it. When the surveyor Charles Ryder actually counted the staircases, he found roughly 70% turning clockwise and 30% turning the other way, and the anti-clockwise ones are not obscure. Goodrich, Kenilworth, Norwich, and the White Tower in the Tower of London, which manages to have both. The defensive explanation appears to trace back to Sir Theodore Andrea Cook in the Edwardian era, and it has been repeated ever since. The simpler explanation is the one people use every day. Most people are right-handed, and a clockwise stair lets you keep your right hand on the outer wall for balance as you come down carrying something. So the stair is not a weapon. But keep this in mind, because in a moment we are going to see 2 of the strongest castles ever built fall, and neither of them falls to the parts everyone talks about. Push past the towers, and you reach the inner ward. And here the castle stops being a weapon and becomes a place people lived. stables, workshops, a smithy, a kitchen, a chapel, and in the middle of it, the thing that decides how long any of this matters, the well. Every feature we have walked past buys time, and time is only worth having if you can drink. A castle with a deep well inside the walls can wait out an army camped in its own filth outside. A castle without one is a beautiful building with a clock running. At the heart of it stands the keep, the last box. Thick walls, few windows, and the entrance deliberately placed on the first floor rather than the ground, reached by an external stair through a small, fortified building of its own. That means an attacker who has crossed everything else has to fight upward, through a narrow door, single file. Inside, the floors stack, storage and provisions at the bottom, the great hall above it, private chambers, and a chapel above that, and the roof walk on top for one final view over the ruin of the day. If the keep falls, it is over. So that is the whole sequence, from the road to the roof. Every layer kills twice, first on the approach and again after you break it. Which raises the obvious question, did it work? Yes. And the way the greatest of them finally fell is the most human thing in this whole story. Krak de Chevaliers was the strongest castle in the Crusader world. In February of 1271, the Mamluk Sultan Baybars arrived beneath it with an army, took the town at its foot and set his engines to work through March. His miners, brought from Aleppo, dug beneath the towers, and on the 30th of March a tower came down, and his troops got into the lower ward. And there the machine did exactly what it was built to do. The lower ward is not the castle. The inner ring stood above them, higher, intact, and unbroken, and Baybars did not force it. Instead, he sent the garrison a letter, written as though it came from the Count of Tripoli, ordering them to surrender. It was a forgery. The Hospitallers, cut off with no relief army in sight and their commander's authority apparently on the page in front of them, complied. On the 8th of April, they asked for terms, and they were granted. The greatest fortress of the age, after roughly 36 days, was taken with a sheet of paper. Château Gaillard is the other half of the lesson. Richard I built it above the Seine to hold Normandy, and it was the state-of-the-art of its day. In 1203, Philip II of France sat down in front of it and stayed for months. In February of 1204, his sappers finally mined the outer bailey, and his men fought through the breach, and then they stopped because the middle bailey sat on rock they could not get beneath. What broke it was not engineering. A French soldier noticed that a latrine on the western side emptied out beneath the chapel. He climbed the shaft, found a chapel window that had not been barred, and got inside with a handful of men. And then they made as much noise as they possibly could, so that the garrison believed a whole force was already in the building. On the 6th of March, Roger de Lacy, with 20 knights and 120 other soldiers left, surrendered. The finest castle in France was entered through its toilet. Hold both of those next to everything we just walked through. The barbican, the double portcullis, the murder holes, the lists, the flanking towers. All of it worked, and none of it was the thing that decided the day. Castles were not usually taken by breaking the design. They were taken by hunger, by disease, by a relief army that never came, by a lie on a piece of parchment, by a window nobody had barred. The stone was there to buy time, and time is only a weapon if somebody outside the walls is coming to help you. And then the machine died anyway, the way machines do because of something outside it. In the 15th century, gunpowder artillery grew from a curiosity into a wall breaker, and every advantage we have walked past inverted. Height, which had been the whole point, became a liability. A tall wall is a target, and a tall wall drops its own rubble into your own ward. Thin, high curtains that had shrugged off stone throwers for 300 years came apart under iron shot. So the answer went the other way. The new fortress was low, thick, packed with earth to swallow impact, and its walls were angled into points so that every face could be covered by fire from another. That is the Star Fort, and it kept the same idea the castle had. Never let the attacker stand anywhere that isn't covered from somewhere else. The stone got lower. The thinking did not change. Because that thinking is what the castle really was. Not a wall, a sequence. Every feature bought a delay, and every delay was overlooked by a second feature that made paying for the first one expensive. The men who designed these places were not asking how to keep an army out. They knew they could not. They were asking a colder question. When the enemy gets in, where exactly will he be standing, and what will be above him when he gets there? That is why the breach was never the victory. Standing in the dust of a wall you just brought down, with a higher wall in front of you and men already shooting into the gap, you had not broken the castle. You had simply arrived at the part of it that was built for you. If you found this interesting, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us which fortress or siege machine you want to see broken down next. And if you haven't already, give this video a like so more people can find it.